Welcome to Contra Costa College Library's Jumpstart workshop on plagiarism. In this video, you'll learn what plagiarism is, what some of the gray areas are, and some easy strategies for avoiding plagiarism. So first of all, what is plagiarism? Well, from the Contra Costa College's Student Code of Conduct, plagiarism is defined as representing someone else's words, ideas, artistry, or data as one's own, including copying another person's work, published and unpublished material, and material from the internet without appropriate referencing, presenting someone else's opinions and theories as one's own, or working jointly on a project, then submitting it as one's own. So I called out referencing because librarians are all about references and citations. In other words, let's simplify this definition. Plagiarism equals stealing someone else's ideas and trying to pass it off as yours. Now, why is this such a big deal? Well, this is something that academics take incredibly seriously. And while it's pretty common out in the world, like if you have spent any time on the internet, you've probably realized that people copy from each other all the time. And you read this literally the same passage from this website, da da da. It is very common. Unfortunately, it's considered a really serious offense in college because we're trying to train students into becoming scholars. And so scholars protect their ideas very closely, and they want to make sure that you are attributing where you got your ideas from. It's really important to know how to cite other people's work as, and make it clear who's talking when you're doing your research papers. This is something that you're learning how to do as a scholar in training. And so part of my goal in making this video is making sure that you know what to avoid and how to do it. Do not think that you will not get caught, because even though the internet has facilitated a lot of plagiarism and it's real easy to just copy and paste, it's also real easy to compare something that's turned in at Contra Costa College using the Turnitin software. It's real easy to compare this with literally every other paper that's ever been turned in any college using Turnitin. They have this great big database and they say, oh look, this is a 100% match to the paper that was turned in at Orange College in Southern California. Hey, what do you know? It's a 100% match. So there's some pretty sophisticated tech solutions out there. So don't think that you won't get caught, because you probably will. Now, plagiarism can be intentional. It can be deliberate. And it's probably pretty obvious, when you pay somebody to write your paper for you, or you purchase a paper online, or you copy lots of text and you don't cite it. Those are pretty clearly, deliberate intentional plagiarism. You can also plagiarize yourself, meaning that you write one paper and you turn it in two different classes. This is also considered plagiarism, that it can be, self-plagiarizing is still plagiarism. So that's something to be aware of. It might be a surprise. So make sure that you don't try to write the same paper for two classes. Plagiarism can also be accidental, and I think this is what happens most often in cases of academic dishonesty. It's just that the student in question did not know that they were doing it wrong. So not knowing how to cite the sources correctly in the citation style that you're trying to use, that's probably, I think in the most cases, that's at least me as an instructor, this is what has happened to me. In my experience, students, they just didn't know they were doing it wrong. So my goal in making this video is to learn how to do it right. There is also, I've seen this named a couple of different ways, either mosaic plagiarism or patch writing, where you're swapping out word for word using synonyms. So you're keeping the same sentence structure, but you're just changing out a word here and a word there. But the general structure and the meaning of the original is still present. This is still plagiarism. You are still using the ideas and the sentence structure of the original. It's still plagiarism. So don't do it. Just come up with your own words. Come up with your own way of saying that same idea. Then it won't be plagiarism. Also, misattributing a quote or an idea to the wrong source. So this is another example of how students can accidentally plagiarize and not even realize that they're doing it wrong. So I have a whole bunch of tips at the end of this video about how to avoid accidental plagiarism. If you are doing intentional plagiarism, that's up to you and your ethics. And I don't agree with that. But if you knowingly go into something going, I'm going to plagiarize my paper, that's on you. But my goal in making this video is to help you avoid this gray area of accidental plagiarism. I want you to know how to do it right so that you are successful and that you know you have your career as a scholar without any whiff of plagiarism. That's my goal. There are two main ways that you can use other people's ideas responsibly. The first way, which you're probably familiar with already, is direct quotation. So this is using someone else's words with quotes around it in your writing. It's pretty common in academic writing. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've done it. But there are some important formatting pieces that need to go into this in order to do it properly. So the examples that I'm using here are in MLA Citation Style. APA does it differently. So if you are trying to write an APA paper, there are different examples, and I'll have those linked in the video description. But this is what a proper in-text citation should look like in MLA Citation Style. So notice that there at the beginning is a signal phrase according to Consumer Reports. So it's really clear where this came from. It came from Consumer Reports. There are quotation marks, quote, 4.8 million people, da 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 da, end quote. And then there's a little bit in parentheses that is the page number that this quotation was printed on in the printed version of Consumer Reports magazine. Then it goes on to say, this demonstrates that social media users need to be more concerned about the information that they share online. So that's the author's thoughts. That's my thoughts as I'm writing my paper. I'm reflecting on what I just quoted, and I'm trying to tie it to my bigger argument. So the main thing when you're writing an academic paper, it's almost like you're reading a theatrical script. You want it to read like a theatrical script where this person's talking and then this other person's talking and then the first person's talking. So you want it to be clear at every point throughout the entire paper, who is talking? Is it your sources or is it you and your ideas and your thoughts and your opinions? So in-text citations are like those little things, the names of the characters in a theatrical script. That's what those in-text citations are meant to be like. So it's really clear that your source is talking and then you're reflecting on what your source said. And also with citation styles, there's always two halves. There's two pieces. So the first piece is the in-text citation. That's the thing in parentheses. That's the signal phrase that's in the body of your paper. The second piece is going to be the works cited, the citation on the works cited list. So that's the full citation with all the information that your reader needs to find the sources that you have used. So in this case, it's an article called Facebook and Your Privacy that was published in Consumer Reports in June 2012. The second way to use other people's ideas responsibly is a paraphrase. So in other words, this is someone else's ideas, but it's in your words. So paraphrasing is a bit like covering a popular song. It's enough like the original that you recognize the main idea, but it's clear that it's not the original because there are subtle differences. And so it's obvious that it's a cover. It's not the original song. Here is what a paraphrase would look like in MLA citation style. It's the same information as the previous example. But in this case, notice that I did not use a signal phrase. So there's no according to, source. So because I didn't use a signal phrase, I have to put the source author's name, Consumer Reports, in the parenthetical citation. So inside the parentheses, you'll see Consumer Reports and then 24, the page number. So one of the things that that gets students tripped up a lot is that with in-text citations, it's kind of a stylistic choice. There's a lot of different ways to do it. There's not one formulaic, it's not always 100% the same way. So it's up to you as the author to decide what works for you best. And so making sure that you either use a signal phrase, and if you don't use a signal phrase, you put it inside the parentheses, you put the author's name in the parentheses. If it's a printed source, you always want to put the page number. But sometimes if it's an online source, it doesn't have a page number. If you don't know the page number, you don't have to use it. But, so it's not 100% going to look the same for every source. If you have questions about in-text citations, please ask your librarians, like me. I love in-text citations and I'm happy to help you do them right. So make sure, reach out, ask for help. This is our bread and butter. This is what librarians do all day long. So please ask us, because that's what we're here for. So my personal rule of thumb for paraphrasing and direct quotations is paraphrase as much as possible, but use quotations only when the author's words are awesome. So making sure that use paraphrase as much as you possibly can, because I feel like it's a much more powerful tool in your toolbox to distill down the ideas from your sources and actually think about, what is the main thing here that I want to talk about? And that helps you to build an argument and to understand how the pieces all hang together and how to make a coherent pitch as you're writing your research papers. So, and only use the author's actual words when the way that they express themselves is so much better than you could ever possibly do yourself. Here are some examples of different ways of the ways that in-text citations could look in your paper. So in the first example at the top of the screen, you'll see, Wordsworth stated, that's the signal phrase, talking about romantic poetry, but then there's a direct quote in there. He says it's a spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. That is a very evocative and amazing way of talking about poetry. Of course, he's a poet. He's going to be real poetic. So this is a great example of when the author's words are so awesome, you could not possibly duplicate them in any way. But because I use a signal phrase, the author's name is not present inside the parentheses, but there is the page number. Always the page number. Direct quotation always gets a page number, unless you don't have a page number because it's an electronic source. The second example does not use a signal phrase, and so you'll see the author's name, Wordsworth, is in that inside those parentheses. But it's the same kind of thing. It's got a direct quote, so you've got to have a page number. When there's a page number, author's name inside the parentheses. The third example is a paraphrase. And in this case, in my opinion, it is not as powerful as the other two because it doesn't have that real evocative, spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. That really pithy and great quotation is not present. And so it's not quite as powerful. So, remember, it is your job as a scholar in training, as a writer in training, is to decide what's going to work best for whichever situation works for you. It is a stylistic choice as a writer. You get to choose what's going to work best in every situation with the information that you're trying to convey. But I think it's important that you use things smartly, that you know what the different format looks like, so you can make the best choice for what's going to work for you in your papers. So we've talked a lot about citations. We've talked a lot about, how to do it properly and what things look like. You don't need to cite everything. So let's not go crazy. Let's talk for a minute about things you don't need to cite. You do not need to cite your own ideas and experience. So your opinions, your thoughts, your reflections on your sources and what your sources have to say, you do not need to cite those things because those are your own ideas. So a well-balanced research paper is going to be a mixture of stuff that comes from your sources and stuff that you think about what comes from your sources. So you don't need to cite your own thoughts. You just need to cite the stuff that came from someone else. You also don't need to cite common knowledge. So things that, your roommate, your granny, your next door neighbor, things that they would know. You don't need to cite common knowledge. So pretty much everybody knows that Sacramento is the capital of California. Pretty much everyone knows that the Golden Gate Bridge is in San Francisco. So you don't necessarily need to cite things that are common knowledge. But once you get past that point of common knowledge, and if you're not sure, you can ask a librarian. Then you need to start citing these ideas and facts and knowledge. So for the rest of the video, I'm going to talk about strategies to avoid plagiarism. I have a handful, and I think this first one is probably the most important. You want to keep track of your sources. This is the best way to avoid accidentally plagiarizing somebody else's ideas in your paper. Know where your ideas came from. Know where the ideas came from. Keep track. Keep good notes. Make sure that you're trying to keep track and that you're always clear where the different ideas came from as you're pulling yourself together, as you're pulling your ideas together, your paper together. One tip is to take notes with the same habits and signal phrases like you would in your paper. So according to source, as you're writing out your notes on paper, as you're typing up your notes on a screen, keeping like talking about and saying according to, or, so-and-so says this and this and this and this. If you like taking notes by hand, print your sources out and physically write the ideas on that piece of paper. If you prefer to use electronic sources and keep them on your computer, you can actually do the same thing using most PDF readers. Use the text box feature to actually type your ideas directly into that file. And that way you can keep your stuff together. Everything, your ideas, the quotes, the sources, the highlights, everything's all in one place that is directly connected to that source. If you're having trouble paraphrasing or summarizing your sources, try to do it without looking at the source. The things that are easiest for you to remember are probably going to be the most important that you want to discuss in your paper. So don't, look away from the screen, look away from the source as you type it up, as you write it down. Try to avoid looking, and because that also is going to force you to use your own words to summarize those big ideas that you're trying to pull out of those sources. Use note cards to assemble your source. I really like note cards, either paper or virtual. I've used both because it helps me organize. So I can actually put stuff in a particular order, move it around, and it helps me to, I think, build an argument that's really powerful because I can sort of follow how things flow. Like, does this flow work better, or do I prefer switching up the order and having it go this way? So note cards can be, and there's a lot of different, obviously there's paper note cards, but if you prefer to use online tools, virtual tools, there's a lot of different online and virtual note card paper writing, idea writing tools that are available. One of them that we actually subscribe to through Contra Costa College is something called Noodle Tools, which is actually, it's more of a citation management tool that has a note card feature built into it. But what I really like about Noodle Tools is that it's based in projects. So for each paper that you write, you wanna create a new project. It allows you to keep track of your sources and build the citations for those sources. What I love about it, and I think the best part about it, is that you can enter in all of the pieces of your citation. So that's the author, that's the page numbers, that's the volume, the issue, the journal that it came from, the link to the database, all of that stuff. You put all that into Noodle Tools and it actually it formats the citation for you. So it puts the commas in the right place, it puts the italics in the right place, and you don't have to think about that piece of it. You just have to make sure you pull the information from your source to go into that. And then at the end, when you're ready to get your works cited list, you can actually download it complete and it's ready to go. Just add it to your paper and you're off and running. So I think that's pretty powerful, and I highly recommend using Noodle Tools if you don't already have it, if you've not used it before. If you have any questions about getting yourself a Noodle Tools account, you can ask a librarian. That's what we're here for. Speaking of asking a librarian, if you need help with any of the pieces of the stuff that I talked about, so citations, references, finding sources, using sources, doing in-text citations, all of that stuff, please reach out and ask a CCC librarian. Literally, my whole job is helping students and waiting for students to come ask me questions. That is what I get paid to do when I'm sitting at the reference desk. So I want to be there for you, and my colleagues are all in the same boat. So we're there for you. We have a phone number that you can call, you can text us, you can email us, you can use the QR code on the screen to get linked with our 24/7 chat service. Links to all of these things are in the video description as well. So please feel free to reach out and ask for help. We also have a library of other Jumpstart workshops, a lot like this one, on all sorts of different topics, talking about MLA style, APA style, using the library, finding sources, using your sources, all kinds of different stuff. So please reach out and get the resources that you need to be successful at Contra Costa College. My name is Katherine. I'm one of your CCC librarians, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this workshop. Thanks for watching.